Hi, my name's Erica and I'm the business integrator for the Teacher Next Door. If you're not familiar with the Teacher Next Door, Jen Larson, who's in the bottom right corner of the screen right now, is actually the Teacher Next Door. She created her Teachers Pay Teachers store and her blog about 8 years ago, and she's even a published author. So today we're going to talk about reading games during your centers, not your whole centers, not how to set them up or anything like that, just specifically using reading games in your centers during that time. And they have a ton of benefits, so let's talk about them. You can easily differentiate with reading games. You can give an assessment, whether it's a formative or a summative assessment, at the beginning of your unit to gauge where your kids are with these skills, and then you can assign different games to them based upon those skills. More about that in a different video, though. We'll talk about assessments too. You can reinforce and spiral skills in these too. So if you cover character traits in the beginning of the school year like I do, but you want to make sure that that stays fresh in your kids' minds, especially as you approach standardized testing time, you can also incorporate those reading games into your reading centers to keep those skills fresh with your kids. You can also reinforce social skills and soft skills, meaning collaboration, problem solving, communication, all of those things that several students at the upper elementary level sometimes have a difficult time with. Reinforcing those skills and giving kids the opportunity to practice those skills and even fail at those skills sometimes is super important. So now that we've gone over the benefits of it, let's talk about our group size. If you have a big class like I have in the past, I had 29 students last year, your reading centers are probably going to be jam-packed, but the reading games that we're going to talk about today offer a couple different options. Now, the ones that I'm going to talk about are the ones that are the Teacher Next Door's reading game bundle. Those reading games were created specifically for centers time. They originally came in a print version. The next step they came in was a digital PDF version where they were interactive, and very, very soon, like within the next week, they will also have a component that's Google Forms, so they'll be self-grading as well. So all of these options that we're going to talk about will work for you in your classroom. So you can have your kids writing solo for reading games. So if you use those Google Forms or those digital interactive PDFs, those are going to give your kids instantaneous feedback on those games so they can complete them all on their own. But if you do want them to work in partners or groups of 3, you can very easily use the print version, which has a game board as well as task cards and a recording sheet, and assign those within your reading centers as well. I like to differentiate that within my classroom. Sometimes I like to use the print version, sometimes I like to use the digital version. If by any chance we happen to go under virtual instruction again, under some sort of emergency, you have the ability to have these centers run smoothly by teaching kids to use them within your classroom. But say a student goes virtual for a while, you can also assign the digital games to them to complete at home, which is super convenient. So now that we've talked about group size, let's talk about what the other centers are that are going on during this time, because designing your classroom and where these centers are located might be something that you want to think about. So some centers that we like to use in our classroom are independent reading centers, teacher time, of course, because we're meeting with small groups, word work, that should say work, not word. I need to work on word work. So word work can include spelling, grammar, vocabulary, context clues, things like that. Reading skills, so when I say reading skills, I mean the skill that we are working on currently in our unit. So if that's compare and contrast, that reading skill is going to specifically only touch compare and contrast. The next one I'm going to talk about is informational text. Now, I like to include informational text within all of my reading centers. Even if we're in an informational unit, I will still include an additional amount of informational text within there. Just because me personally, my reading curriculum is really lacking within informational text, so I like to include it in my centers as much as possible. Especially because as kids grow up, that's the majority of the reading that they're going to be doing. I also have a text center, so we personally use Freckle within our classroom. Let me go back to that slide real quick. We use Freckle and Newzella, or Newzella, whatever one you say. I know it's debated on. I include that. My kids are one-to-one on their iPads, but when I have not had one-to-one, I've also had a center with just 5 computers where the kids can log on and work independently there. Obviously, they're not working with partners within that group. I also include my writing center here. Now, I like to include writing for pleasure here, so I might include a poetry activity or a journaling activity. This is separate from my actual writing centers themselves, though. This is writing for pleasure or writing about something that we've read. And then, obviously, reading games is another center in there. And then the last one I wanted to mention is Genius Hour. Now, it's very popular. It can be very difficult to set up. If you're not sure what it is, give it a quick Google. It gives kids a lot of autonomy in the classroom and a lot of choice within their work. So something to consider within your reading centers. All right, back to games. Let's talk about 2 options. So you've got a time center and a self-paced center. You might have a timer that's set for like 7 to 11 minutes, say, for each center. If you are working with a timed option, you're obviously going to want to assign a game that's going to be able to be completed within that time. So that's something to consider. The digital games that I'm talking about come in small chunks. So if you are assigning the main idea game, you'll get 4 sets of those games which have a smaller amount of questions. So you can assign just set 1 if you're using a timed version. Now, if you're going through self-paced centers and you want kids to go through an entire game, like say the entire print game, and then they'll move on to their next center, they're all on their own, say they have a task list or a checklist to go off of, you have that option available to you as well. Or you can assign all 4 of the digital sets. It's totally up to you. All right, now that we've talked about the options with timing, we've also got the options that we've been talking about all along, print and digital. Now, I am going to show you what the print version looks like and what the digital version looks like as well. That way you're kind of familiar with what I am assigning and how those things are moving within my classroom. But before we do that, this is super important. If you don't have these, you have nothing. We've got to set expectations for our kids. Now, the way I like to do this in the beginning of the school year is by setting sense norms. Now, these are like your 5 senses. Like, what does it look like? What does it sound like? And inevitably, you're going to have a kid be like, are we going to taste the reading games? And you're going to deal with that upper elementary behavior however you see fit in your classroom. But talk about what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? When you set those sense expectations, you're making a connection with your kids, and then you're setting those norms without setting rules that start with don't do this and know this, because we want to set norms that are expected behaviors within our classroom. Now, I also like to model it. I'll call myself up to the class, and then I'll pick a couple kids as role models who can model what playing the game would look like. Now, I do model what it shouldn't look like and what it should look like. We obviously do shouldn't first, and then we follow up with what it should look like next. After that, we're going to practice. All of the class is going to practice just a reading game. Now, we are not doing all of our reading centers at once. We're not writing and playing with the tech center and doing our reading games. We're just practicing what a reading game should look like. Now, I usually do this in partners because it's easier that way to set the expectations with group work and with volume level and things like that. So practice, practice, practice. And if something doesn't go correctly, say the expectations aren't met and it gets a little bit too loud, end it. We're going to keep practicing and keep setting those expectations at the beginning of the school year. So by the time you get to October, December, April, you still have those expectations set all the way through. Now, you might have to revisit them after winter break, but that's totally normal. Let's talk about print games management. If you have a storage center for them, teach your kids how to put them away. Practice putting them away. Do it procedurally. Do it slowly. Practice it for 3 full weeks and reiterate those expectations to your kids. You will not regret it. Digital responsibility. If you are playing with a digital game, you should not be on any other apps. You should not be using the camera on your iPad, for example. Set those digital responsibility expectations as well. And then reinforce the purpose, because we also want kids to know that when they're practicing a game or when they're playing a game, they're playing it for a purpose of learning. They're not just playing it for the purpose of winning, right? So talking about that growth mindset, like even if they're getting ones wrong, especially if they're on the digital version, not to click through them super quickly, or if they're on the paper version, not to cheat. And then talk about why we don't do those things, because we're reinforcing our learning, and if we are playing that way, it's not going to benefit us in the long run. All right, so I want to show you what the 2 covers look like for the reading game bundles, the ones that I've been talking about thus far. There is a set for 3rd grade, and then the 4th and 5th grade games are combined, because if you are a 4th and 5th grade teacher, you know that the reading standards are very, very close to one another. So 4th and 5th bundled together, and then 3rd grade is separate. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So I'm going to show you what the main idea game looks like. And the reason why I'm choosing the main idea game for 4th and 5th grade is because this one is totally free. You can see that over 20,000 people or teachers I should say, have downloaded this game. So if you would like to join, I will put the link in the description box for you. Or you can just go to the Teachers Pay Teachers website and then go to the Teacher Next Door and search free main idea game, and you'll find it from there as well. So let's take a look at it. All right, so here is my Google Classroom. Now I have already assigned it in Google Classroom here. You can see that this is the instructions tab, and I've got a PDF here. But before we even explore Google Classroom right here, let's look at what's included when you download this file. So within here is a separate PDF that says Getting Started with Digital PDF Games. I have created a separate video on how to assign the PDF games in Google Classroom in case you ever forget how to do it. You can find the link within this PDF. So that a little YouTube symbol right there is clickable. You can just click on it and it will take you straight to the video. If you would prefer reading directions over listening to directions or watching them, there is also a blog post which contains the exact same information in there. So if you ever forget how to do this, you do have instructions, don't worry. All right, the next thing that you will find in the PDF file is obviously the whole PDF file with the print version. So I'm going to scroll down. This is the cover page right here, and then I'm going to scroll down to the first game board. Now there are directions in here, and then there is a recording sheet and obviously an answer key as well. And then here are the printable game boards. Now there's a black and white version if you don't have access to a color printer, but if you do want to print and laminate, there is a colored version as well. You can also use anything within your classroom. I personally use buttons as my little movers on here, but you can use whatever you would like. And then we come into the task cards right here. So that begins on page, let's see if I can find that. I'm not 100% positive because I can't see my page numbers in here, but it's a little bit later on in the PDF. So here are your printable task cards. I like to put these, I have them next to me actually, in my little task card holders. Now I got these from Target. These are just the little containers. They were in the dollar spot. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Michael's Craft Store has those super fancy like suitcase looking task card holders with all the different colors in there. And you can print off regular task cards and they will fit in there. I do have to say, if you're cheap like me and you buy the dollar ones from Target, the task cards will not fit in there. They're a little bit too big. So if you find these dollar ones at Target, print this at 90% of its value instead of at 100% of its value, because then when you chop them apart and laminate them, they will fit in your task card holder. Anyway, I do store those and put them into a certain place within my classroom where my kids do know how to access them. The game boards are also laminated and available to them. I keep them together so they don't get lost. So that is included in the PDF, and then you also have access to the digital interactive version. Now this says set 1 in the corner. Remember, there are 4 sets. So there's 4 sets of, I believe this one has 12 task cards within each set. So if you have those time centers, use these smaller sets so your kids can go through all the task cards and not complain to you that they don't have enough time to finish the game. So this is a digital interactive PDF, and what that means is that the kids can click on this, or if they're using a tablet, they can tap on it. So it obviously has the directions on the page, as you can see, and I'm going to hit Start Game right here. And you're going to see that it changed the page to present the kids with the first question. So this main idea game gives kids 4 options to choose as a main idea. 3 of them are details, and then 1 of them would be the main idea. So it says, which one is the main idea? Hammerhead sharks like to eat squid and octopus. Stingrays are their favorite food. Hammerhead sharks eat a variety of foods. Or, let's see. Can I scroll down? Because I can't see what that says because my head's blocking it. All right, fish are also part of their diet. So now I'm going to zoom back in so I can see that. And I want to show you what happens when the kids pick the wrong answer. So it says, sorry, try again. So that's giving those kids that instantaneous feedback that they need to self-correct themselves. So they're like, oh man, I got to go back. So I'm going to click the go back arrow. And now it's going to take me back to the question. And I'm going to try again. So hammerhead sharks like to eat squid and octopus. Let's try that one. Nope, still wasn't the answer. All right, now I'm down to 2 more. So those are 2 details that I chose. So what could be the main idea? All right, let's hit variety of foods because they're talking about a lot of different things that they like to eat. Awesome, so that was the correct answer. So now the slide congratulates them and it moves them on to the next question. So you can see that this question here is different. Now, you can assign this in any learning platform because it is a PDF. If you're using If you're a Microsoft school, no problem. You're a Google school, no problem. You're using Canvas, no problem, because it's just a PDF. It's not in anything else aside from PDF version. So I'm going to go back right now to my Google Classroom, and you can see that I added the PDF here for the kids. Now, I like to assign this as a material instead of an assignment, just because I don't grade these and the kids are using them independently anyway. When they click this, though, you can see that, there we go. You can see that it opens up and they can kind of scroll through it. Now, we've had some feedback saying that the kids can scroll through it. We know that because it is a PDF. So here's a way to remedy that. You want to make this pretty big so it fills their screen. So you can hit these 3 dots, that's a snowman button, and hit open in a new window. And now, to prevent the scrolling, and that's an expectation, by the way, that you want to set with your kids, is do not scroll through the game because that defeats the purpose of playing the game. So you can see that it kind of fills the whole screen here, and this makes it a little bit easier and a little less appealing to scroll through for kids when it just does fill the entire screen. If you're using an iPad, you can also add these PDFs to the kids' iBooks app in there, and then you can go page by page and they can't scroll through it at all. So can be assigned in Google Classroom, can be assigned in Canvas. I do not believe it can be assigned in Seesaw, but if your kids have devices that they're using Seesaw on, as long as you can share a PDF with them, be it via email or whatever server system you guys are using in your classroom, as long as you can send them something, like send them a file, you are good to go. All right, now let's talk about what's coming. We also have Google Forms coming, meaning that that's going to give your kids it's still going to give them feedback instantaneously, but it's not going to be after every single question. So the kids are going to go through all 12 task cards, and then they will receive their score. So you might be asking, okay, what's the benefit of that? Well, you also get to track that data then. So if the kids are going through centers and they're kind of like messing around and you want to keep track of that data to make sure that they're staying on task, you've got their score right there for you. Or you can also use those scores to form your groups. So if you have a kid who does complete this main idea game and they don't do very well, you know that you can pull your 4 or 5 kids who didn't do well with this practice into your small group either that same day or the next day, so you can serve those kids with the skills that they need at that point in time. So now that we've gone over all of those sets, let's take a look at how to find these. All right, so I am in the Teacher Next Door store on Teachers Pay Teachers right now. So you can scroll down and you can use the custom categories on the left-hand side, and you can find the ones that say reading games. And you can go ahead and click that category and it will bring up all of the reading games. Now these are sold individually. Feel free to try out the main idea game for 4th and 5th. And then by the way, for the 3rd grade 3 game, that's going to be the character traits game. Super, super popular. And even if you teach 4th or 5th grade, you can absolutely grab that game to work for you in your classroom. So here are all the reading games. You can see that the, I'm so sorry. Lost my train of thought there for a second. I'm also 7 months pregnant, so if that gives me an excuse, I'll take it. All right, you can find the reading games bundles in here as well. You can see that a couple other things come up, but if you do want an easier way to find them, I'll show you that in just a second. All right, so an easier way to find them and go directly to the games themselves would be to use this bit.ly link. So you can see it here on the screen. It's got bit.ly/TTND, and that's all caps for the Teacher Next Door, and then lowercase reading games. That's going to bring up every single reading game available in the Teacher Next Door shop on Teachers Pay Teachers. Go ahead and browse through there. We do have the Reading Centers bundles as well, and that bundle will take you from the first day of school all the way to the last day of school. You've got the print version, the interactive PDF version, and the Google Forms version coming this week, possibly next week, and it will be ready for the 2021-2022 school year. If you have any questions, the inbox is always open. You can either send that over on Instagram or you can visit the Teacher Next Door website and also send it through the contact form on there. We're happy to help.